Are you ready to embark on a transformative journey of rebuilding your life? Look no further than the Rebuild podcast. Join us as we dive deep into conversations that nurture personal and spiritual growth. Through the wisdom of the Word of God and practical applications, we'll guide you towards becoming the best version of yourself. On this podcast, we will delve into a variety of topics and insights, ranging from mental and emotional well-being to personal development and spiritual growth. Together, we'll explore the paths to healing, resilience, and the restoration of inner peace. Subscribe now and let's rebuild our lives together, one uplifting conversation at a time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rebuild podcast. I am your host, Sean Romy, and today I would like to talk about finding our spiritual core. In other words, finding who we are, self-discovery. And the reason that I want to talk about this is I think in today's day and age, and this is something I think that also transpires or has transpired over the course of generations. We really strive to put our best foot forward, right? We put a lot of walls and barriers, we put on a lot of covers, really protecting ourselves from the judgment of other people. I think in that same vein, in that same aspect, that same dynamic, we end up hiding ourselves from ourselves. And that can be a very painful process, if you know what I mean. Because not only are we not allowing ourselves to be who we truly are, but then we find ourselves lost. I think with the way that we move, the way we maneuver, and the way that society really pushes a lot of just going and getting it in, we really don't make for a lot of time, in order to really reconnect with who we are, or to connect with who we are, because we have so much going on. So I want to be able to kind of break that down, talk about it a little bit, figure out what's what, figure out how we can find out who we really are, and really embrace our fullness. Because I think that's very important. Proverbs 23:7 tells us that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And for a lot of us, we really do put on the mask that we hide behind. A lot of us, we have walls and barriers. We keep ourselves so guarded that sometimes I think we lose ourselves in our own identity. So I figured, why not today be the day that we unveil and peel back the layers? We break down the walls and barriers. We find our true selves. We find out who we really are. As Lao Tzu once said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I think we should take that step. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this thing. The first thing we want to talk about is the layers of our authentic selves. Now you think about the concept of who we really are versus what our ego may say. Here's a unique thing behind this, right? When we get into the concept of finding what our ego really pushes, and the ego pushes this dynamic of seeing ourselves in that perfect form. No flaws, no issues, no problems. Nothing's ever downside to operating in this place is we can really lose sight of the truth of the matter. Think of it like looking in a mirror. Right? If I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I deny the fact that whatever I see is whatever I see. And I know that might sound strange to some people, but me being the large individual that I am, I realize that I do struggle with this sometimes. For those that may not know, when I was younger, I was a beanpole. So every once in a while, I'll look at myself in the mirror, and I can still see the smaller, slimmer guy, mostly in the face. Right? Because I've lived with the face for well over 38 years now. So that's new. That's not new to me, but it is something that I've had to live with. And seeing everything else, it's kind of, I see it, I feel a certain kind of way, but then I see it again, and it's like, it's not that bad. And the denial of, really seeing that there are some things that need to be worked on can, leave me with a sense of discomfort. Right? Because I see that there's work that needs to be done, but I'm also looking at the guy from yesteryear. The guy from yesteryear isn't the guy that's sitting on the other side of the mirror. That's what ego can do, right? Ego can allow us to stay locked in a certain mind frame. It allows us to lose sight of reality. Puts us in a position where we believe that we're just showcasing or accepting the parts of us that we want. Let's look at how mainstream society really pushes that dynamic. Right? We see in today's day and age, especially if you go into the social media realms, we have a lot of influential people telling us that as long as we have good and pure intentions, then there should be nothing wrong when we do the things that we do or say the things that we say. And the downside to that can really be, if our attitude or our mindset doesn't really match what we're intending to do, then we'll abandon how it's perceived or what it looks like when it actually comes out. Again, kind of like the way that I just explained, me looking at myself in the mirror sometimes. And we'll just accept what we were intending to do. Well, that was my intention. The way that you received it, that's on you. And the problem with that, again, can put the responsibility, we're putting the responsibility on someone else because we're justifying what we're doing as opposed to being a little bit more objective. When we're being true to ourselves, we're being objective. Right? And I think that's a huge difference between the ego and true self. Right? Understanding that when we're being honest, we can take a step back. We can really look at things as they really are. We're allowing ourselves in at that point to accept things that need to be worked on. Right? Think of it like working on your car. Right? If you're driving your car and your car starts to give off certain signals, hey, my tire pressure's low. We could be in denial and say, nah, tire pressure ain't low. gas tank might be a little low. We might be in denial behind that. I know my car. You have a lot more mileage in you. I don't have to go spend the money on that. Right? And all of the different signs and things that the car is telling us. Right? The car is being honest. Hey, I need maintenance. I need this. I need that. And if we're denying it from an egotistical place, right, that ego place, it might be a little bit too late by the time we actually take action on it. And then it might become a bigger problem. Think about Adam and Eve. This is a great example. And I actually posed this question some time ago on Facebook. When you think about Adam and Eve in particular at first, when she's presented with the opportunity to eat the fruit by the serpent, she takes a minute and she's really assessing this thing. Now, it could have been a split-second decision. It could have been something that was dragged out in accordance with the Word of God. It could have been something, again, it could have taken a good, long thought process. No matter what happened, the element that becomes the question is, how did she allow herself to fall victim to this temptation? And there's a few different ways to look at this, and one of those ways is part of the question that I posed. What if the fall had more to do with them losing sight of who they were? And it makes a lot of sense, right? Because we were made in God's image and likeness, and we were all familiar with that after the fact. But think about the dynamic of being created and not really being tested in that regard, and being told that you have an opportunity to be something that you already were. You compromise what you think you know about who you are to get what you already have in you. And again, from an ego perspective, that can happen, right? Because we allow ourselves to believe that we are something that we might not be, or we're trying to change into something or accept something that's already in us. And how does that apply in the sense of the church or the body of Christ, if you will? I think a lot of the conversations that we have as a body kind of fall into the same category. Yeah, we do admit that we're made in God's image and likeness, but then I've also listened to, not just from a musical perspective, but from lessons that were taught, that there are a lot of things about God that God has given us that we deny or we reject. We deny sometimes the ability to fix our own problems. We call ourselves helpless, for lack of better words. We tell ourselves we can't fix it. But God gave us the power to fix those problems. We deny ourselves the wherewithal to know or to be connected or to discern from a spiritual perspective outside of us just judging and telling everybody what they should be on and this, that, and the third. But when it comes to reflecting within, we kind of really find ourselves being helpless and saying, basically saying that we don't have the opportunity or capability to do so. Falling victim and accepting whatever the status quo is in terms of what we're being given. And that hurts. Right, but if we really come to know who we are and can see the qualities and characteristics of who we are in the mirror, we can see, again, what everything looks like. And just as much as I talked about earlier, looking at the mirror and seeing the other guy, the younger guy, smaller guy, I can look in the mirror and I can see the bigger guy. I can see the extra weight in different places. Having to lug around a lot of extra baggage and whatnot. I understand that. I can see it. But there are those moments where I do struggle with seeing one like the other. And I think for us, we have to understand that dynamic, right? We have to accept who we really are. And kind of talked about this a little bit with regard to the relationship aspect, right? And one of the passages that we utilize talk about examining ourselves. And that's very important, getting into the dynamic of really finding out who we really are. And that passage was 2 Corinthians 13 and 5. Right? Examine yourselves. Whether you be in the faith, prove your own selves. And why would that be important? And again, it's important to know, because how else can we grow? How else can we become who we're purposed to be if we don't know ourselves? And we can't be deceived by just accepting one side or accepting all the good stuff, or really trying to suppress or deny or hide or put up walls around the things that we're afraid of really having to deal with. I think that also puts a lot of elements to a certain perspective, if you will. Before we delve any further into that, we all have to bear in mind too that we're all unique. Right? In Psalms 139 and 14 reminds us that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And if we all say to ourselves that we're one of one, then we have to embrace that. I remember, in my lifetime growing up, I was deemed one of the weird kids, because I didn't really act like the environment that I come from. And I don't mean to say that to speak negatively about my peers that I grew up with. I'm not saying that to speak negative towards, other family members or those that, I was around more often. But I do say that as a means of looking at big picture wise. We, for some reason, we almost seem to carry ourselves as one-dimensional. And I don't mean that to, again, come off as disrespectful or anything. But it's almost as if, we fight and argue in a lot of cases to really push a one track kind of aspect. We test our blackness, or we test our ability to relate to life, the struggles, the tests, the trials, the character, our stances, our morals, our values. And I again, understanding our history, big picture perspective. A lot of us, if we peel back the layers of our ancestry, we can go back and find that we have a lot of similarities in terms of our roots. And I get that. But even still, from that standpoint, it's kind of hard being an individual or carrying ourselves as individuals when we're really trying, in a subconscious kind of sense too, becoming, one in an unnatural kind of way. And that's, again, that kind of really takes away from us really accepting that we can all be unique. And I'm loving the way that we've kind of grown out of this, or we're starting to grow out of this. Some of the things that I was into when I was younger, I used to get mocked behind, I'd be teased, be laughed at. And now the very same things that, I can see from the younger generation, it's acceptable now. And I'm happy to see that because, again, that creates a lot of diversity. And the funnier thing is even when I do find younger men, young women, and in some cases, people around my age, maybe even a little older, embracing some of these things now, I think to myself, man, I really wish, you didn't have to hide behind that from the standpoint of trying to blend in and be accepted by those around us. Finding out that, you might have had a friend or, a classmate or, a coworker that was really into the thing that you're into, but they were, putting on a facade or, hiding behind trying to be accepted by peers. I think back to how many different people were into, certain types of anime. And, that was really interesting for me. Like I said, it's a norm now, so easy to get into, but that was definitely a challenge being younger, And I think, again, that if we're able to accept that, again, as we talk about looking in the mirror, then it makes life a lot easier for us to, navigate through everything else. And again, this is where that passage comes into play. We really need to know who we are. And we have to embrace that. We can't just hide behind the fact that, well, normalcy looks like X, Y, and Z, and we're challenging ourselves to fit in with whoever. And I'm not just speaking on just the black community at this point anymore. I'm just, from a generalized perspective, right? We have to be able to embrace who we are. When I had come back from my last deployment, I really started to walk into that stride. Just learn to, okay, whatever it is that I am or I'm about or I like or I want, I desire, I can't hide behind this facade of trying to be what other people expect me to be or what I think other people would expect me to be. And so I started to embrace who I was or what I liked or what I was into and all of these other things. And the beauty of it is the more comfortable I became with that, the more comfortable I was just embracing me as a whole. Wasn't trying to live off of some expectation of being a giant, being a big guy, being a black guy, being an older guy, whatever the case may be. I am who I am. And the confidence that I had in that, really allowed for a lot of growth, being able to help other people. And not only that, but it allowed for my relationship with God to really flourish in a way that I never would have imagined. Because again, the authenticity, right? The authenticity, the transparency, the honesty really allows for God to flow the way that He intends to flow in all of us. We can't do that if we're hiding behind covers and walls and barriers and facades. And I think I might have talked about that before, right? The way that God moves, it's like a flow. And when we're talking flow, when we're talking, being put in a position where, like electricity, we can't allow for resistance or a disconnect, as in the flow stops. But once we embrace everything, we allow the connection to be what it is, everything is smooth sailing from there. In fact, once we find and accept the layers of our authentic selves, we can then really connect with our spiritual essence. So as we talk about the definition of the spiritual essence, again, finding who we are at our core, we find that connection to how God works in all of us, right? That allows for us to really be open and enlightened by a lot of different things, okay? I think I've talked about this a few times over the course of this podcast, where I wanted to see God outside of the four walls of the church. Just sick of the politics and the customs and the traditions and all of that stuff. Felt very cultish, for lack of better words. And God took me into really seeing the connectivity of who He is through nature, which was reinforced by a particular movie known as The Lion King. And one of my phrases that I live by is all things are connected in a great circle of life. And the truth behind that is really mind-blowing and really mind-boggling when you really think about it, because we try to separate everything. And the reality is everything is connected. There's a purpose for everything. Right? And in fact, utilizing one of the passages that we had talked about from before, there is a time and a place for everything. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 1, that's that passage. Right, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. So if everything is designed to fulfill a purpose and everything is designed for a season, whatever that season may be in our lives, then understand that it's going to be for our good. In Romans 8:28, we're all familiar with that passage, right? All things work together for the good of them that love the Lord. So if we're created the way that we are created, we're all unique. We have our things that make us the individual individuals that we are, the things that we're drawn to, the things that motivate us, the things that get us operating towards that purposeful place, then we have to bear in mind that, again, at that core, that aspect of us to serve a purpose. And this is, again, one of those reasons why I wanted to step away from the four walls of the church. Right? Because a lot of us, when we think about being in purpose and finding ourselves, we link the concept or the idea of fulfilling God's will and purpose strictly to being in a pulpit. Or when we think of the word ministry, we think of it literally just focused around the pulpit. The downside to that is we become very centralized on one thing, and we don't really embrace all of the authenticity of who we are in order to bring forth what we can utilize to impact the people outside of the body. We think about how many people we see in Hollywood that are truthfully connected to God. You think about how many athletes you find that are truly connected to God. You think about different men and women in different walks of life. Estheticians and beauticians, and you have physicians of all different kinds, architects, engineers, podcasters, right? Journalists, bloggers, teachers, other educators, counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, and so many different other walks of life. And many of us who, if we were to dictate and showcase that, we can have the ability to still be connected to God and do the thing that we're passionate about, so long as it's morally acceptable and it's legal, then we should embrace that. Right? When we understand the impact, again, that we're all connected, it allows us to really see that the life that we live is greater than just the existence that we've been so indoctrinated towards. There's a parable in Matthew chapter 25 that talks about the talents. And one of the things that I had learned this when I was really young. I was thinking of the talents as literal talents. And in that process, I took that to heart. And so, I would delve in and dive into different things. I've made some beats. I've shared them, not on a bunch of platforms. Very self-conscious about a lot of stuff, but I've done that. I've acted in some plays. I've been on radio. I've played sports. Right now I'm tied into ministry and embracing a lot of different things. And the beauty of it is the more that able to explore and tap into the different talents, interests, and things of the sort, the more comfortable I am in realizing that it's all tied into whatever it is that God needs for me to do, big picture perspective. Because we're supposed to go out and reach the people. And I think Paul explains it best, right? That we have to become all things to all men that we might save some. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to go out and do all of the immoral things in order to be the influence of the lighthouse. But it does open up an opportunity for us to connect to certain types of people. I made a lot of friends over the years playing basketball. I overcame a lot of insecurities through sport. I was able to embrace that, I had a lot more to offer by embracing, acting and doing ministry and stepping out of certain comfort zones. Passion that I have for learning and things along that line, it all plays a part. And again, that goes back again to peeling back those layers. We do understand that when we peel back those layers and we're finding ourselves and we're understanding who we are, finding the purpose and meaning behind material stuff, we do understand that it's a process. It's not going to be something that happens overnight, which is the beauty of the parable from that standpoint. Now again, I didn't realize that the talents were not literal talents, but they were actually terms of currency. But even still, the principle still remains the same, right? We're taking something and we're able to invest it and build it and cultivate it and multiply it. And that same type of principle really allows for us to share with other people how to do the same thing. And out of the three individuals that were there was one individual that was afraid. They were afraid to lose everything. They were afraid to risk. They were afraid to put themselves in a position to be stretched or to really practice in a certain type of faith. Playing it safe, as we like to call it in today's day and age. And it really hurt the master who gave them. They punished the man. Like, why wouldn't you even from a play it safe perspective, just do something that would be somewhat of a reflection of what I do? And some of us have hidden behind, the things that we could utilize to change our lives. We might have an idea we're afraid of. Because we don't want to have to deal with ups and the downs, or we don't want to deal with certain types of exposure, or whatever the case may be. I've worked in different MLMs. I've worked in ministry again. Done the school thing, and one of the most powerful lessons I've learned in my lifetime is the wealthiest place on the face of the earth is the graveyard. And rightfully so, because we have so many men and women who have sat on ideas, life-changing, world-altering type ideas. And it's really, really powerful when you think about that. Right? Because again, a lot of us will find ourselves maybe choosing the safe route, and we'll disconnect from our true purpose just to exist. It's never a good thing. It's never a good thing. When we're conscious of who we are, again, embracing everything about us, from top to bottom, good, bad, and ugly, we're connecting ourselves again to our spiritual essence, our core. And again, that's very important because we know where we stand. And I think we talked about that in another episode, where we, in order to know what our strengths, our weaknesses, our downfalls, our weak areas are, we have to examine ourselves. We have to take the time to find out what that is. And it's really hard to do otherwise. Right? And again, that's where the ego kind of comes into play. Right? If I'm just allowing myself to just go about and accept the way that this is, just going through the motions, again, I can miss out on some really great opportunities. The irony, if you will, regarding social media in today's day and age, we can kind of find a lot of people testing this ground. Certain realities are starting to be brought into the forefront. There are people out there who might be great motivational speakers, who could be motivational speakers. You have individuals out there that could be, great artists or actors or actresses, maybe comedians. I know a lot of comedians are finding themselves in this avenue because, that could have been a hidden talent, or, people are utilizing the platforms to be able to build on top of, what they've already had in terms of influence. And that's, that again, that's a great thing to look at. Outside of social media, though, we have other things we could look at. Right? We should have people out here that might be influenced in getting into writing books or writing, laying out courses. I think that would be powerful too. Like, some of us are discovering who we are in the process of just breaking down certain walls and barriers. Letting go of, again, looking at how social media kind of works now. We sometimes will tear down our own walls just to try things out. It has its benefits and it has its pitfalls, but all in all, just being able to see the confidence in people trying things now. And I know that, a lot of people from yesteryear might feel different behind that. But the perspective, the opportunity, the open-mindedness, you can see people really trying to be different. That's good. Speaking of being open, right? We want to create and cultivate a mindset that embraces openness and transformation. When we go through our journeys, we want to remind ourselves that we're evolutionary creatures. I think that's another one of those things that hurts us is, in terms of the walls and the barriers and the ego. We try to remain true to that old thing, stand on that old principle. But if I'm really embracing my journey, I'm going to evolve. I'm going to grow. I see this, I'm again having to go back to social media for this. I remember a lot of people that, had a certain mindset at a certain age, reach a certain aha moment, I guess, for lack of better words, where they're realizing, hey, the principle I was standing on when I was younger, I can't stand on that now. I'm getting older. This doesn't make sense. It's not the same, whatever the case may be. Right? I have X, Y, and Z going on. Responsibilities matter more, whatever the case may be. And that, again, opens the door to showcase that we're evolutionary creatures. We evolve, we grow. We have to embrace that change. We have to understand that, certain changes are necessary. Now, as far as the core goes, yeah, the core may remain the core, give or take whatever your core beliefs are. But still, understand we are a very evolutionary species as a whole. And again, Romans 12:2, right? Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So if I'm transforming myself, I'm growing, I'm evolving, I'm stepping into a new place, I'm stepping into, new belief system, or I'm stepping into a new value. I'm breaking down the perspective that I have, and I'm becoming more aware. I'm allowing myself to be open to embrace whatever is necessary to move forward, to creating and establishing parameters, rules, regulations, morals, values, whatever I need to really navigate and become the best version of myself that I can be. When I was younger, before joining the military, I used to tell a lot of my peers, go to school. Some of them felt as if it was too late for them to go to school. A lot of them were in their early to mid-20s. Some of them even older. I'm telling them, you can still go. Who's telling you you can't go? There's nothing wrong with starting the journey late. Embrace that. Right? There's no right or wrong answer when trying to become the best version of yourself. Right? Everybody's timing, everybody's path to self-discovery is different. We talk about from a success standpoint, there are a lot of men and women who have found success later in life, trying different things out, really stepping out on faith, if you will, to embrace, becoming who they're supposed to be, or who they believe they're destined to be. And I think, for a lot of us, we fall victim to that can't be for us. We can't embrace that. We can't become those guys. Circumstance might not allow it. Perspective might not allow it. We kind of fight with that, trying to be what everybody else around us is, and embracing the idea of making it that way, right? Holding true to certain core beliefs and values that we might have outgrown. Another one of those things I used to encourage people when, especially after I had joined the military, is leave. Go experience some other place. Pick up your roots. Go elsewhere. And I wouldn't say it to be spiteful. I would say it, coming from a place of, at the time that I was at that stage in life, I really started to embrace certain aspects of being comfortable with who I was. At the time, I had just joined the military, and it was one of the first times in my life I'd actually felt like I belonged somewhere. And I understand that was part of God's will and purpose. I didn't feel judged because of the way I talked, or I wasn't being judged for the way I walked, or what my background was, or the fact that I was older coming into the military, any of that stuff. But going back and looking at even just other areas of life, one of my first year playing college basketball, I had a teammate at the time. I was 20. I think my teammate at that time, my oldest teammate I had was 26. First time going to school, wanting to play college sports. I've played opponents that were around the same age and older. It happens. I've seen and heard stories of athletes that make it to certain professional statuses at older ages in life. It happens. And there's nothing wrong with that if you really are wanting to go down that path. Certainly take advantage of it. And you have actors and actresses, same thing. Entertainers, same thing. You have people, the body of Christ, the leaders in the body of Christ, pastors, ministers, evangelists, prophets, and all these other guys with these titles. Many of them they didn't grow up in the church. Many of them lived a life outside of the church before coming into the church. Some of them didn't embrace their calling until later in life. It happens. But when we're open to allowing the journey, to allowing the revelation, to allowing the objectivity, to allowing ourselves to really be transformed and not be conformed to the way that the life track, that the status quo is, we can see that there might be some things out there that we might really had enjoyed, or we might find ourselves really enjoying, or really embracing, or really loving, that mainstream society wouldn't allow to happen. I remember, coming across different people who were, again, into things that when I was younger, were weird. I remember watching a guy when I was in high school. He hopped on a skateboard and he's doing tricks better than some of the people I'd seen on TV. I'm like, bro, you on a skateboard? Why don't you ride a skateboard? Again, finding out people were really into or really about Pokemon. You start finding out people really were interested in anime. You're like, why are you guys hiding behind the image of the environment? If you like these things, bro, embrace it. But we can't, sometimes we have a hard time letting that perception go. And so we stay locked in, and it hurts us. Think about how many dreams there were, classmates, friends, who wanted to be different things. But we have to allow ourselves the opportunity to grow and evolve. And again, we can't remain or stay stagnant for the sake of perception. That's an ego thing. We don't want to wrap ourselves around ego in order to feel or look or be accepted or perceived as normal. When you really start to look at it, that kind of normalcy is realistically, it's overrated. I like to think of the cartoon SpongeBob SquarePants, and there's a particular episode where Squidward leaves the neighborhood that he lives in because he lives next to SpongeBob and Patrick. SpongeBob and Patrick are some unique characters, I'll admit that. And Squidward finds himself able to live in this community with a whole bunch of other Squidward-like types, into certain types of just all of the same things that he's into. We'll just put it that way. And in the beginning, he's really excited about it. And he's standing on, this is awesome, this is beautiful. But then after a while, things start to become mundane and routine. It's not the same. There's just it's not what I thought it was going to be. Conforming to this way of living it's not me. And in a sense, he really changed, in terms of mindset, and that started to spark the way that the other members of the community saw him. And eventually he got kicked out. Right? But it wasn't before he caused a lot of chaos in the process. He's trying to change the way that things went, because it just seemed like it was just this mundane routine after a while. And for a lot of us, whether we realize it or not, when we conform to whatever mainstream society tells us is the thing to do, becomes that. We embrace it and we accept it, and a lot of us utilize the phrase, that's just the way the world is. And that hurts. Right? And again, talking about how normalcy is overrated, the inability to grow, in other words, conform, is also a lot of work. And the reason it is a lot of work is we're having to break and adjust and reform and remold and reshape, and we're putting in all of this extra work to fit into something that we're eventually going to grow weary and tired of. And what good does that do us in the end? So then how do we allow ourselves to uncover who we are and our essence? Easy. We allow ourselves the opportunity to step out of our comfort zones. What do I mean by that? Taking time to pray. I know for a lot of us that might sound cliche, but I'll admit this. I went to an event that my church had. It's called 6 Hours of Prayer, and in the process, we pray for 6 hours. And just listening to us pray, pushing through all of the struggles that a lot of us had, just getting to the place, to the venue, to perform the 6 hours of prayer was a process. Right? But it was something powerful behind being able to just take on the opportunity to pray. Finding what is connected to you in the moment. What you're being led by. Some of us were led through prophecy. Some of us were led through messages on unity, understanding, forgiveness, restoration, praise. Connection. And I'm thinking to myself, that's powerful. And all of it necessary. Because these are things that we all need. Matthew chapter 6 is a great example of the type of connectivity that God is looking for. And it's not a corporate thing in entirety. It's just something that is very intimate, one-on-one. And it's necessary. Being able to communicate with our Creator is necessary. We have to have that. I do recommend taking the time to pray. And I know for a lot of us, we think about statements like that. Right? Pray. You might go back, you might listen to it and you say, wait, you said 6 hours of prayer. Yeah. Not an intimidating, not to come off as I'm holier than thou, because trust me, I've never, for myself, prayed for 6 hours in one sitting. Okay, I'm not trying to create that. I live that lifestyle like that. No. But again, through prayer, spending time with our Father, it's precious, it's mandatory. It allows us to really open up to seeing what God really has for us. Meditation, same thing. Right? Being still, being quiet, allowing for God to work in us in a certain kind of way. That helps too. Right? We need that. It's kind of hard to embrace the idea of allowing God to dictate and to guide us and to show us what to do if we're constantly going and moving and doing. We're in our heads about this, we're in our heads about that. Kind of goes back to the ego thing we talked about. Allowing ourselves to be in serene places. It's necessary. Finding time to operate in some of the things that, again, we might find our talents in. Yeah, I know I talked about that parable earlier, and I talked about how I took that literal. Like I said, in that literal, though, I was able to really see for myself just how other interesting skills there were in my life that I never really knew or I even had. And it's interesting how you can connect with people that way. Made some really cool friends my first year in the military because I wanted to make music. Met a friend he was a producer slash DJ. It was him and another friend, and they had programs, and the one guy actually, he gave me a copy of his program. He put it on my laptop, and I had that for a little bit of time before my laptop, I destroyed my laptop on accident. Taxes, what can I say? But the beauty of it was him doing that really built that talent inside of me. And the passion that I had really helped the way that I approached listening to music moving forward. I thought it was interesting. Not only that, but then when I found my brother was interested in the same thing, it really kind of opened some doors, and I was really excited about it, and kind of helped him out in the same pattern. But again, when we talk about meditation, or we talk about things along that line, we want to make sure that we're open. Again, it's important. As we're growing and as we're evolving and as we're becoming who we need to become in the process, we have to allow ourselves to take care of self. Because again, when it comes to, finding the essence of who we are, one of the most difficult things out there is being able to nourish that. And this is what I mean by that. It's easy for, a young man or a young woman to join the service. And during their time under contract, they're good. They live life, and they're disciplined, and they've got themselves together. They have an idea of what they want to be or what they want to do, building towards that. They're different. And then they come home, come back to a place of familiarity, and over time, they slowly start to lose sight of where they were when they were in that position in the military. And give it enough time, and they find themselves right back in the same position that they were in before they left. They had no one to really invest in or pour into them, or to care for that newfound person that was there. lot of us, if we don't have individuals or we don't have support groups that allow us to embrace that new being, we're going into hostile environments. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. But if we don't find ourselves being in places where we can be valued or embraced, then it's going to be difficult for us then to be nourished. And we can find ourselves regressing, going backwards. We don't want to do that to ourselves. Take the time to reflect on where we are. I stand by journaling 10,000%. Whether you just put down notes in your phone or you have an actual journal or diary and you talk about where you are, it's necessary. Go back and look and see, you can see mark the moment where things change. Maybe you see yourself going higher. Maybe you see yourself falling lower. But it's okay. It's imperative for us to reflect. It's imperative for us to look at ourselves in the mirror and embrace what we see on the other side. The good, the bad, and the otherwise. Not to be the person carrying the ego and acting as if everything is the same. This is a journey. And as long as we're allowing ourselves to really embrace honesty, finding our true selves, everything else will fall into place appropriately. God, I thank you for this day. Thank you for the opportunity to learn about finding the authentic self. I pray, God, that we learn about changing the way that we think of ourselves, not seeing ourselves as failures or thinking that we have to stay true to morals and values that contradict who we are and what we're striving for. That we can look ourselves in the mirror, whether proverbially speaking or literally speaking, and we can accept what we see. No more denial about who we are. We don't want to embrace an egotistical perspective of self, where we're denying the opportunity to embrace those vulnerable points. God, I pray that we find ourselves connected to our fourth spiritual being. Purposeful, profound. It's necessary. Allowing us to see life beyond the material things that we're often indoctrinated to strive towards. Allowing ourselves to be conscious of a bigger meaning for life, bigger purpose. Being able to be open-minded, being transformed, like Romans 12:2. Now we can examine ourselves, like 2 Corinthians 5:17. Because we're not reprobates. We are worthy. us in your image and likeness. And because of that, we should embrace being able to find out who we really are. No more denying it. I pray, Father, that we find ourselves connected to you. That we can embrace who you've made us to be. We're all fearfully and wonderfully made. I pray that we find ourselves evolving and growing and becoming exactly what you called us to be according to your will and purpose. I pray your will be done, Father, in all of our lives. All these things I ask in your holy and heavenly name. Amen. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, just for taking the time to come out and listen to us today. I pray that you guys are able to find, again, your essence. Embrace you, who you are. No need to conform to what the status quo is. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are unique. Embrace that. Don't try to break yourself to conform to what everybody else is saying is what you should be. God made you the way that he made you. Embrace that. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Rebuild Podcast, and I'm your host, Sean Rowan. I love you all. I pray you find your peace. I pray you find your purpose. And I pray you find your success. Peace.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. Tune in weekly as we dive into topics such as finding your calling, overcoming obstacles, building resilience, and strengthening your relationship with God. If you're ready to embark on a transformative journey of faith and personal growth, then join us on the Rebuild Podcast. Together, let's build a solid foundation that aligns with God's will and leads us to a life of purpose and fulfillment.